I used to think that career progression meant climbing the ladder. So I started my career as a software engineer and then grew into senior software engineer, staff engineer later on, moved to management and director of engineering. So I felt like I need to progress vertically, title after title, more people under me, more scope. And I realized later on in my career that, first of all, I was letting other people decide what success meant for me. It happened for me when I was promoted to staff engineer that I should have been thrilled, but deep down, I really didn't want that. I wanted to lead people, to build teams, and no one knew about it because I haven't said it out loud. And then I moved to management, and then I thought, oh, that's the only career path available for me until I decided to leave the career I was doing. The episode today really hit home for me, and I wish I knew it sooner. And I spoke with Adriane McFetridge, and she's a former engineering director at Netflix, a board member, CTO, and now upbuilding, Ironman training, force of nature, and she believes in something radical. Your career doesn't have to be a ladder. Actually, it can be a jungle gym. Messy, fun, unexpected, and yours. And I wish I listened to her many years ago. And I want to welcome you all to From a Woman to a Leader podcast. I am your host, Limor Bergman Gross. I'm a former director of engineering, and I turned executive coach about 5.5 years ago. And this podcast is about women in tech who want to lead boldly, break the rules, and define success on their own terms. And in the conversation with Adriane, we talk about why traditional career ladder mindset keeps people stuck, how to reframe taking a smaller or lateral role as an opportunity and not a failure, how to build your narrative when pivoting careers, what really drives fulfillment, and it's not the title or the paycheck, by the way, and how Adriane's persistence, not perfection, is her biggest superpower. So if you're just, thinking to yourself, like, is this the career I want? Maybe you're considering a pivot, maybe you're recovering from a layoff, or just kind of feeling restless in your current role, this episode will give you permission to get curious, take risks, and make your next move count. I want to remind you to not forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review for this podcast. It really helps me and it helps reach more women. So your support helps more women find this show and lead the way, their way. So are you ready? Let's redefine what leadership looks like and let's dive right in. Hi, Adriane. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Good.
I'm super excited to having you today here. And we're going to talk about a topic that is always relevant about career progression, but we're going to take it to a spin and talk about how it can look a little bit different than what people envision when they think about career progression. And I remember in our pre-call, you mentioned, actually career can look like a jungle gym rather than a ladder. And I really resonated with it. So first I wanted to ask you, what does it mean, a jungle gym? How does career progression look like when it's a jungle gym?
So I guess if you think about the jungle gym in the playground with kids, there's lots of kids, they're moving up, they're moving down, they're moving across, they're moving sideways. And as I look at careers and you look at the experiences that you want to gather as part of your journey, if you start to view it more as I'm getting different experiences and they can be up, they can be across, they can be down, they can be sideways, you start to sort of bring in this rich tapestry of experiences that you have. And it's not a straight, I've moved up the ladder and I started at position X, and then I've taken the next position, and then my supervisor, and then the manager, and the senior manager, and you're sort of moving your way, linearly through the ranks, as it were. And given sort of how people want to value their career, I think it's having that perspective of, a jungle gym can be sort of a fun place. I mean, if you think about it, when kids go to the playground, they don't run up to the first ladder they find and want to climb the ladder. They run up to the jungle gym and they want to climb all over it and try new things and see the world from different perspectives. And so I sort of try to take more of that approach to my own career progression throughout, my many years.
Yeah. And can you give an example for a moment in your career where you actually took the jungle gym approach for your career progression?
Well, I think there's a couple of points in my career where I've done something different than is sort of the traditional sort of, started, I'm in computer, software engineering. And so it's like you become an engineer, you become a manager, senior manager, director, and you sort of move your way through. I took an opportunity to become a chief of staff, which is not in the engineering rubric of the career ladder. And so I was a chief of staff to the CEO of eBay at the time. It's a very different role. I saw the business from a very different lens. And then in coming out of that, instead of going back into engineering, I went into a role where I worked in cross-border trade and tried to find business opportunities and ways to facilitate making cross-border trade more easier for our sellers, easier for buyers, all the logistics that go into it, which is not an engineering role. And is it a step back? Is it a step forward? No, it was more of like a step sideways and see the world from a very different side and gain that perspective. I eventually went back to engineering, but I think that was one area where it was like, I took a risk and I did something that was very not engineering focused to better understand, one, how I liked it, to better understand what it looked like from that perspective. And then went back into engineering with that richness of my understanding of how do my counterparts on the other side of the conversation, what are their motivations? What are they looking for?
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing, Adriane. I think one of the concerns, if I'm trying to play devil's advocate, and I've done very much ladder kind of career, a little bit up and down, but yes, it was a ladder. Definitely, my entire career was in software development and leadership. Like, let's say I had an opportunity to do something different. First of all, how do I even find those opportunities? And secondly, like, isn't that going to prohibit me from going back to engineering leadership if I want to? Obviously, in your case, it wasn't, but that's kind of the things that goes in my head when you...
Can it prohibit you from going back? I don't think so. I think it, you always run the risk of whatever is top of your CV is what people say, oh, well, this is who you are. And creating your own narrative, creating that story. If, looking through my CV, I've had many individuals say, please help me understand how you pulled all this together and what does that look like and what took you on these very different journeys. And so it's sort of human nature to say, oh, okay, this is who you are. This is what you're doing right now. Therefore, that's the type of person you are, instead of sort of going further down into understanding. So you do have to push a little to ensure that your narrative is being expressed in a way that sort of brings all of that together. If you are passionate about, like I found out through the course of that career opportunity, that I love working in engineering. And, to be perfectly honest, I wasn't the greatest at doing sort of the business side of it. It wasn't where my passion was. It wasn't how I sort of woke up in the morning and thought about the problems I wanted to solve. And so because of that, I was like, okay, fine. Well, then I will look for, and I'll be open and opportunistic as to what that next engineering role would look like, as opposed to it has to be this and it has to be in this field and I have to have it, this size team or whatever it was. I was like, well, I know I want to get back into that and I want to, so I'll be opportunistic of what that sort of translates to. And then finding those opportunities, one of the things I've found that I've just done naturally in my own career is I have always been extremely blunt and honest with my manager and many times my skip level manager of what it is I want to do. And I've been very, I had told a previous manager I wanted to work outside the United States. And, I was very clear about it. I looked for opportunities. I asked about opportunities. It's like, hey, what about this one? Or how does this one look? And eventually, because of that conversation and because I was so candid, my skip level boss came to me 7 when I was at eBay and said, hey, we have this opportunity in Sweden. Do you want to do it? And I was like, oh, okay, sure. Great. Yeah, I'd love to. So I think it's being open. I think one of the things folks feel hesitant to do is if they tell their boss or their skip level, this is my career aspiration, they inherently think, oh, I'm telling my boss, I don't like my job and I want to do something else. And so they're going to assume I'm going to leave. And I don't think you should assume that. I think as having led individuals, I love to hear what people want to do, what they're interested in, what their passion is. And if some opportunity comes across my desk, I want to be able to present that to them and give them that choice. But if you don't tell people, they don't know. And mind reading was never in the curriculum at my university. And so I don't know that your boss is going to have that skill either.
100% agree, Adriane. And I think women even more so hesitant to say, what do you want? And this is one of the things that I work a lot with my clients. So you have to be very clear about what you want. Otherwise, as you said, your manager is not reading your mind and doesn't know. And what happened to me, it was decided for me at a certain point of my career that I will grow into the technical side. So I was promoted to a staff engineer and I actually wanted to become a manager. And my manager didn't know that. So she just promoted me to a staff. And then I said, but I don't want that. I mean, moving forward, I don't see myself as going into senior staff, the distinguished engineer, or whatever it's called in your company.
Yeah.
So someone else is going to make decisions for you if you're not coming forward and saying what you want.
True. And sometimes it also helps. I've expressed interest in certain career paths or career opportunities and have received the very valuable but difficult feedback of like, yeah, that's not in your future. That is not something, I don't see your talents really lining up with that. But I do see your talents lining up in these other areas, and having to have that. But it opens the conversation. I think it really does help sort of bring that forward. And you create, as part of that conversation, you create those advocates that we tell people, we mentor people all the time. Find your advocates, have people be, help you along your career. If you're not open about what you want, it's difficult to advocate for somebody.
Absolutely. And I want to ask you another question. So you talk about, okay, being transparent within your workplace. What if you don't feel like you actually want to stay there? Or maybe someone, as we talked before this recording, like maybe you lost your job. And I know a lot of people that lost their job. To be honest, I talked to several women in engineering leadership roles, like director levels and so forth. And they feel a little bit lost because they have a successful career, but it's not easy to find something that will be equivalent to what they've done. Any thought about what they can do? So maybe think maybe a little bit differently than they think about it right now.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, because I've been in those shoes as well. I have, I live in Silicon Valley, and, it's not a matter of if you're going to be laid off. It's a matter of when will you be laid off, because that's just the cycle of the industry, of the companies, of how it works. And through those times, I think the first time it happens, it's devastating. And then every time after that, you're like, all right, okay, I kind of get it. And through those times and those opportunities, I have found that defining what it is you're looking for in the next role. So yes, it's easy to say, I had a team of 50 people and I led senior managers and I had, P&L responsibility or whatever sort of was the things that you had done in the previous one. Say, I want to have this or better. Otherwise, I'm going backwards in my career. And what I have tried to do through those times of opportunities where I could pivot, I can change, I could do something different. I said, okay, well, what is it I want to learn in my next role? And I look for those opportunities where I can grow as a leader, as an engineer, as a person, and really start to see, okay, what are those experiences I will get? I have taken jobs where the title and the size of the team was actually smaller than my previous job. And I have found that in some ways more fulfilling, because I've like, okay, I will able to learn something. It's a new technology, it's a new industry, it's a new space. And I can start to myself gain that experience. And so as I've done these, I've started to sort of translate, I guess, basically it's, what am I learning for each of these roles? Am I learning something new about myself as an engineer? Am I learning something new about an industry? All of that starts to build as a leader and, as a human, and how you interact with people. And so I think if you're framing it in what am I going to learn, the opportunities become a lot more, and you become more open to them. I am insatiably curious. I love to learn new things. I love to learn about new people. And so I find that by tapping into that part of who I am, it makes it more fulfilling in what the roles I get. And to be honest, it makes it less stressful as I'm looking for those new opportunities.
I like that. What do I want to learn rather than, I think we tend to be very hung up about the title and the number of people you manage. I mean, I've been there too. Like, oh, I managed that amount of people. I don't want to go backwards. I actually went backwards, to be honest with you, Adriane, also, but in the same ladder, not sideways. I went backwards because I wanted the experience of working with a smaller company, like not a corporate, like a startup. And I went to a very small team. I managed a very small team. So yeah, I think just learning and getting different experiences, maybe learning, as you said, different technologies, I mean, that eventually help you grow.
It does. And some of the roles can be very impactful. When I went to Sweden, for example, the team I was leading was 30 or 40 engineers, and the team I led in Sweden was 6. but I was a CTO. I was, the impact I had was significantly larger than the role that I had had when I was in the US. And so I really think it's, what is it you're learning? What's the impact? How are you able to contribute? And I think that makes it much more fulfilling, less so than how many people, like you said, and what is the title of, your job.
For sure. So for someone out there that lost her job, I'm just taking an example, director of engineering, and she's stuck, right? She's stuck in the mindset, oh, the next role has to be at least director, maybe VP. Has to be at least 50 people, whatever that may be, right? So you mentioned about, okay, what am I going to learn? What else do you think she can ask herself to try to open her mind a little bit and remove that mind block and a little bit of being stuck in there's only one way.
Right. I think when I've talked to individuals when they're like having a particular title or a particular size team, it's a nomenclature to say what is the impact or the perception of the impact that they have in the business, in the company, with the technology. And so when you sort of strip away, okay, well, this is what that means, then it's okay, well, what is the impact that you want to have? And then you start to see, well, there's lots of companies, big ones, small ones, medium-sized ones, different roles and different opportunities where you can have a equivalent impact, but it doesn't have the same sort of veneer as sort of your previous job. And I think that's one thing is you start to want to understand what is that you got out of that particular role that you really resonate with and you really want to repeat or you want to gain more experience with. And I think if you start to translate from that perspective, it's amazing. There's a lot of companies out there, but I will tell you, I right now have sort of started my own little passion project that I'm doing, but I'm not working actively at a company anywhere in the Valley. Times are tough, times are lean, and I have been through enough of these ebbs and flows to know that it'll come around, but until then it can feel very demoralizing when you look around and you're like, okay, you're getting ghosted and you're trying to reach out and you're just like nothing's happening. Start to open your aperture of what is it in the role you had and the roles you've had that you really liked and you want, that's where you got your passion from. And then how do you translate that into other types of opportunities? Is it a medium-sized company where you maybe have a fancy title, but you only have like 12 people, but the impact you have on that business is massive? Or is it, no, I really like working in bigger companies and, the title may be one thing, but I appreciate, the salary or the benefits or whatever it is that you've wanted from that, and sort of start to understand what that looks like for you. I think it's all in how you find joy and fulfillment in your career. And what about your previous roles? What were those qualities, those things? Because I would argue that most people don't say, oh, it's because I had 50 people working for me.
Yeah.
That most people don't say, that was what I got that's my enjoyment, 50 people working for me. You're like, was that it?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're a lot of the time driven by what other people will say and a little bit of ego, like, oh, I have this title, I'm managing this amount of people, so that defines who I am and how successful I am, versus how much impact I'm able to create, as you mentioned, right? Impact is more important than titles and number of people.
Yeah, there's a friend of mine, she's a product manager at YouTube, and she did a thing where she said, if you take away the title of product manager, who are you? And it's the same thing. If you take away the title of engineering director, who are you? And then how do you define yourself? And then from there, you probably find there's a lot of opportunities where who you are really resonates in what, company X or manager Y is really looking for.
For sure. Let me ask you a different question. Let's say I was doing that analysis that you mentioned, like I was looking backwards, seeing what I like. Well, I like solving people problem. I'm good with people. I like solving technical problems. I'm also enjoy understanding the business. Let's say I want a different role. Maybe it's in product. Maybe it's in a different part of the organization that I've never done before directly.
Right.
And I found those incredible opportunities. I think I can actually be a great candidate. Obviously, there's a lot for me to learn, but I can also bring more value. So how do I, as you said, like build that narrative? How do I tell the story that actually convince those companies to even talk with me, especially during those times where we know it's not so easy to find a job?
Yeah, I think, especially if you're going to make a pretty significant pivot, to a large extent, I think you have to sort of check your ego at the door and say, okay, I'll do entry-level product manager Y job. so that I can get that experience, so I can have that, an understanding of what that looks like. Because it's a lot of job opportunities don't necessarily translate across. Like, okay, you've led a team of 50 people who are in engineering, but an engineering mindset isn't the same thing as a product mindset. And it is very different if you're like wanting to go in business development. This is a very radically different mindset. And so you do have to kind of start to some extent from the beginning. I think the other piece of it is tapping into people like if they're product management teams or managers or business development folks or people you've worked with in the past, ask them, say, hey, this, I'm interested, get a better sense of what does it take? What does that look like? How does that feel? Open up your mind to working at, sometimes, smaller companies, a startup or something along those lines, where you're really there to gain the experience and to gain the understanding and see if it's something that you like and you want to do. More so than it is you're trying to have a large team again. I think that is good, better, and different. I think, especially on the engineering side, most engineers fancy themselves. They're very smart, so they can do lots of jobs. And I'm like, yes, you're very smart, but I don't know that you would hire engineers to do every job of a business, because there's certain experiences, certain understanding. There's a way of viewing the world that you need in different types of roles. And I think it's important if you go in and say, look, I'm here. I want to do this. I want to try it out. I want to move to the product side. It can be hard. I have friends of mine who have done this, and they have to some extent taken several steps arguably back, and become more entry level than their experience would say they would be, in order to gain that understanding of working through what that discipline is about. And I think if you're open to that, I think it can be very fulfilling. Other ways you can pivot, you can go back to school. My husband, he wanted to do more in systems engineering. He's now doing a master's in systems engineering because he wanted to move more into that space. You could argue that's taking, quote unquote, a step back, but you're taking a specific change in what you want to do and where you want to take it, and you're investing the time to do that. And then that opens up the world to you in different ways that may not have previously been there.
Yeah. Well, good for your husband. Happy to hear that. I think a lot of people, they're intimidated by taking a step back because they think, I'm never going to be able to go back to where I was. All the time I invested in my career is going to go to the toilet. It's like...
I can see that. And don't get me wrong. That is a definite risk and stressor. I see that you see it a lot with engineers. Like, I want to do management, but I don't know if I'm going to like it. And, there's at some point you kind of have to commit and say, yeah, this is what I want to do. And you have to sort of put the time into it to be successful. But I think that if it is something you're passionate about, you should definitely go for it. If it is something you're like, well, nothing else is working, so let me try that. That can also add to the stress. Like, you want to do what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And is going back in the end what you want to do, or is it you're nervous, you're scared, you're worried, you're stressed? Because it is scary. It's scary to learn something new. Even if you go through your career and you're constantly wanting to learn. I'm right now teaching myself, learning how to do coding, and it's hard. And it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I could just, I get that director job and I'm set and I don't have to worry about this anymore because I can do that in my sleep. But I also find that I'm learning and stretching and growing in ways that I wouldn't have had I just sort of been, sort of sticking with what I know and not really evolving. So it can be stressful, it can be hard, but it can be very fulfilling if you're passionate about it. If you're not passionate about it,
yeah,
I wouldn't advise it to somebody if they're not passionate, because it's just you're just going to like cause yourself more agony and more challenge that you don't need.
For sure. And I personally think that we have to all the time keep learning something. We cannot stay put.
Agreed.
Now, what you learn depends on, as you said, on your passion. What interests you? What do you want to learn?
Yeah. And I think that sometimes you have the narrative that you have told yourself of what you are, quote unquote, passionate about, and then what you really are. And, I've had friends who were like, I'm just not passionate about that. I went into engineering and it's just not what I want to do. I want to open up a cheese shop. And you're like, okay, well, that's a pivot. It's like, yes, but I love it and I enjoy it. But they have told themselves this narrative for so many years. It's hard to, unwind that and really go after what it is that they want to do and that they feel passionate about. And I think that that is also, you will succeed when you're doing things you love, and you will really enjoy what you do when you're doing things you love. And then titles and size of teams become sort of interesting facts about your job, but not what really drives you.
Exactly. It's never the driver. Also not the salary. I mean, you know how many people I had?
Yeah.
How many engineers I was talking about it? They said, oh, but this company will give me more money. I said, well, they will. But that's not what's going to keep you happy.
True. I have been paid a really good salary in jobs I absolutely hated, and I could not get out of that job fast enough, and would take any salary. I didn't care if it was higher or lower, just as long as I wasn't in that job. And that's very true.
Yeah. Incredible. So Adriane, before we end our call today, share as much as you want to share. What are you up to these days? You said you're learning how to code. What else is you?
So I have had there's two particular passion projects that I have sort of been thinking about over the last several years. Probably over the last 2 years, I started to dive into what it would take to sort of make those become a reality. I took a course at the University of Texas where I learned about Python programming and doing machine learning, creating models, learning some about computer vision, further sort of certificate through Carnegie Mellon about computer vision and what's all involved in sort of building and recognizing imagery. And so now I'm in sort of eyeball deep in actually coding and building out one of my passion projects, which is essentially a mobile app. It's hard. I will say, when I did programming about 1,000 years ago, when I started out in industry, it was a little more straightforward. I mean, you were way down in sort of the guts of it, but now the layers of abstraction and the variety of options that are available, and there's a lot of power in what you can do and what you can build, but there's a lot to learn. So I've spent many a day in front of my computer right here, just sort of like, why is this not working? And so that's been actually really quite fulfilling and kind of interesting, sort of taking control of my own destiny in some regards, sort of making my own opportunities. And then sort of on the personal side, I have been training to do a half Ironman in May, which in and of itself is probably like a full-time job, just doing the training. And have been sort of, trying to, it's always been on my sort of list, my bucket list of things I wanted to do. And I set this sort of arbitrary goal of when I wanted to get it done. And that date is coming up. So I was like, all right, well, you don't get younger. So I'm continuing to sort of drive myself and some of these other goals as I start to build it. So still looking for a job, but I also recognize that the sort of a job is sort of a established company, but it's an interesting market right now. It's an interesting time in general, but it's also a very interesting market as sort of where things are. So I am desperately trying to tap into what little patience I have, which is not much, and sort of kind of continuing to work with how do I make my own opportunities when there aren't many out there that I can sort of latch onto. What can I do to build one?
That's fantastic. And kudos to you on a half Ironman. I mean, that sounds unrealistic to me.
Well, now that I'm sort of halfway through it, I was like, my husband, I convinced him surprisingly to do this with me. And about once a week, he's like, why are you making me do this? I'm like, I'm not making you. He's like, why are you making yourself do this? I was like, this, because if we got to tackle hard things. I love a good challenge. I love going after hard problems. And I think, my superpower, not very glamorous as it is persistence. I will just drive something till it's done. And so these are things that really tap into that part of my personality.
Yeah, for sure. And how can our listeners find you?
So I am on LinkedIn. There's, I believe, only one Adriane McFetridge out there. It's a rather unique name. I will admit I'm not super into social media as much, but I'm an amateur photographer. So I do have an Instagram account that I use to post pictures that I have taken. And so it's Adriane Photography, I think, if I remember correctly. Probably those are the two best ways.
Okay, perfect.
But yeah, folks reach out. I love meeting new people. I like learning about people's journey and their story. So happy to chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adriane, for being here with me today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate this. I was so glad you reached out.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you enjoyed the episode with Adriane. And before you go, I'd love to hear from you, what you thought about today's episode. Your feedback really means the world to me. And if you haven't already, make sure that you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next powerful conversation, and also share it with any woman you feel that podcast is going to be helpful for. And don't leave just yet. I just want to share with you what's coming up next week. And next week I'm sitting down with Vinod, and she's a senior engineering leader at Workday, and we explore the power of fairness while you're building yourself as a leader. And we talk about how fairness builds trust, creates stronger teams, and help you shine without putting others down. So stay tuned, share this podcast with a friend who needs some inspiration, and I'll see you next week. Bye!